Welcome to What Drives You with your host, Mike Gourdet. Human solution consultant from Seattle, Washington. It is now time to sit back, buckle up for the show that drives the asking question of what drives you. And now your host, Mike Gourdet.
Welcome to this week's show of What Drives You, the show about why we do the things we do. I'm Mike Gourdet. I'm a human solutions consultant here in Seattle. And today's show, we're going to be talking with Saana Koljonen, who is going to give us a little bit of a different idea about what she thinks passion is all about. So we're going to come right back with Saana in just a moment, and then we're going to go into our normal segment today, which will be about identity, and then we will have our question of the day. So just stay right there. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome to today's show. Today we are talking with Saana Koljonen, who is in Denver, Colorado, right? That's right.
Yes, Denver, Colorado.
All right. And she's going to join us today, and we're going to talk a little bit about passion in general instead of passion specific. Does that sound about right?
That sounds very good.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. Saana, why don't you tell us a little bit, because we've talked and you have a perspective about passion that is a little different from what a lot of people think it is. So can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, let's start with the story that how did I come to this conclusion what passion is for me is that so my passion was always sports. And that's what I thought, like my passion is volleyball because I was a professional volleyball player. And then I got injured really badly and I had to quit I had to retire because of that injury that I got. So then I had a lot of time. I was just like spending months in bed. I couldn't move. I couldn't use my body at all the way that I was used to. Mm-hmm. And then I could find still like those little passion bits like here and there in my life still I couldn't even use my body. I couldn't do the sports that I wanted to do. So then I started exploring more and more like, okay, so there must be something else that still like brings me this passionate perspective towards life, even though I was sad. Like, of course I was just like devastated because I had to let go of like so many dreams and my lifestyle, my job, my friends, my network, like everything that I've worked for like for so long. So then I realized that the passion isn't the sport. Like we as humans, we are passionate and there's something like the passion lives inside us. So then we have like these different things that we are passionate about because not every person is passionate about volleyball. Not every person is going to be passionate about knitting or painting or podcasting, whatever it is. So then I think the passion is not something that the actual activity itself has, but the people bring it to that platform, to that activity. And that's how we get to express the passion that we kind of like lives inside us. And that's how I think about it, right? Like nowadays.
Okay. So what you're saying is that we already have passion in us and we just need an outlet, and what we do with that is how we express that, right? So
yeah.
So instead of thinking from outside in, where you're saying my passion is volleyball, you're saying I have passion and I need it to go somewhere, so it's going to go to volleyball. And then when it can't go to volleyball anymore because of an injury, I'm going to put it somewhere else.
Yes.
So it's movable.
Yeah, it is movable. So that's why you need to know also more. You need to dig into yourself. Like, what are the things that you really can express through that sport or whatever activity it is? So in my case, I realized like I had a very rough patch in my life, 2011. So then I went back to that time too. Like, okay, how did I get over that time? And I was really unhappy. I was suffering from a mild depression during that time. And it was the same thing. Like I couldn't use my body at all. I got injured again and I was very alone at that time. But I put all of my kind of like energy that I had at that time to learning. So I was in school. So I was just like reading a lot of books and everything that could like make me feel somehow productive about myself. So learning was for me at that time that kind of like saved me. So now when I got injured again, like almost 10 years later, I got to do the same thing again. I'm like, okay, I always go back to learning. Like that's kind of like very much inside me. And it's something that is in the core of who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get to express that core bit of myself through something, whatever it is, then I know I'm going to be passionate about it, if that makes sense.
It does. I had a similar experience. Excuse me. I don't know if you remember when we originally talked, but I was a martial artist for many, many years, and I taught it and I practiced it. And then I hurt myself. I hurt my back in 2013. And the doctors were telling me, you have to give this up completely. You can't do this anymore. Yeah. And it was such a blow to my identity, because that was a part of me, almost my whole adult life.
Yeah.
And it took, I was basically on my back for 6 months. I could barely walk across a room.
Yeah, same.
And the doctors were like, you can't do this anymore, because if you do this, you might end up paralyzed. And I'm like, okay, fine. I agreed to that for a while, and then after several years, actually, it just, I was like, nah, I can't, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to listen to this. I'm not going to. This is so much a part of me now, because so many years I put into it, that I'm going to go back and try it again. So I have reestablished that in my life. I can't do it as like I used to do it, which I think is kind of what you're saying, is that you can't go back and do what you were doing, but you can take that and put it in different arenas. So I still exercise, but most of the time now I use it in my practice, and I use it when I'm talking to clients, and I also use it in describing how my life is going to go.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. And that's beautifully said, because I also think that way. Like, so knowing also the things that like in sports are so enjoyable for us. So for example, in martial arts, or for me in volleyball, it could have been like testing my limits, or learning, or maybe it was the team environments. Like, let's just pick 3 that were the most important things for us. Then we can search for those environments where we can like, again, express those. So even though like the realm will not be the same as it was because of like something else that happened, well, we have to accept that, okay, this is not going to be the life anymore, but we can still learn from the previous experience that we had and take the best bits with us, so we don't have to give up everything. And I think that's also when the like the athlete identity, or like you said, like you felt like martial arts was so big part of your identity, so then you don't have to give up on that identity. You can use the best parts of it. And so then kind of like the transition phase doesn't have to be like a funeral. It can actually be something else, and you can celebrate all the lessons and stuff that you have learned and take those with you.
Right. And so what did you do with your knowledge? What did you do with that passion that you had about playing volleyball when you couldn't do it anymore?
Yeah, so first I thought like coaching could be exactly it. So I could teach all those other people who are maybe like hitting the same bumps that I did. And so I don't say like I had a bad, like low self-confidence ever. I think I was pretty confident in my abilities of figuring things out, but I never thought like I'm going to be the best of everything. That has never been like the confidence, the way I see confidence. To me, it's like, okay, I can figure things out when we go. But then only until when I started learning more and more about like self-knowledge and self-discovery and who I am as a person, what are my personality traits and so on, and stopped focusing on my weaknesses as much, something like opened in my mind, so that I could actually see what is possible for me. And not only in the sense of like volleyball, but in life, like, okay, if I wouldn't have these like limiting beliefs, and I'm not saying like I was beating myself down. It was more like subconscious of like not actually just realizing how much is possible. So then when I realized that, my like everything shifted in also in sports. So I was focusing on right things, not anything else external out of my control, but everything that I could actually focus and get better in within me. So, and all of that, like, long story short, is that something that I wanted to also help like athletes who are right now in that same like phase in their career or in their playing, that they would not have to like go through all like years of self-discovery and journey and all that before they can get that one glimpse that is going to like move the needle tremendously for them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I wanted to do. Like, okay, I need to then like figure out a way so I can get close to those athletes, so I could maybe like give them these opportunities also to realize more about themselves and support them, that whatever they need for getting or being successful in sports is already within them. They just need to harness whatever they have and not try to fake something that they are not, because that is consuming energy as well. So you can use that energy so much better. And like having those realizations, like, because you cannot give them to people, they have to realize them by themselves,
right exactly.
Yeah. So that's when I got first to volleyball coaching, but then COVID happened, and then I started working also like when I got injured, so that was 2018 December, to a global company called Extended Disc, who does behavioral assessment, so basically like personal analysis. So then we created together a tool for athletes and coaches and teams to like help exactly with this process. So that's how I got into more and more into this world, and I'm never going back. If I can just stay here, I love it. I love helping athletes and coaches as well, and the teams, so they can really get to know themselves better, so they know what to do, like in a way that makes them feel meaningful and successful at the same time.
Okay. So going back to that original proposition about having all this passion, what do you think drives that? What is it that you think drives that need for passion?
For me, or in general?
For you or in general, whatever you took away from that question.
Need for passion. I think like many of us are very familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, the value hierarchy.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think passion comes from the self-actualization. Like it's gonna be like on the top one. Like once we have all the other needs kind of like filled up, then we have also like, now we really want to also feel passionate about life. So there's this like zest or drive that we want to feel, so that life just feels more exciting. Because we have all we wouldn't need to feel excited about anything if it would be fighting for getting a house or food to the table,
Right.
Then we wouldn't have this like luxury of trying to get something exciting in our lives, so that we would feel more meaningful about it. Then we could be passionate about just like hunting food or whatever it could be. So that's how I can like see it. Like passion isn't something that we would need in the very beginning of our lives. It just builds up when all the other layers are kind of filled, and then we are ready and we want more from life.
Okay. So, all right. So if I'm hearing you correctly, according to Maslow, you have several levels of needs that have to be satisfied before we can get to self-actualization. So, and what you're saying is that as we go through our life and we start satisfying those levels, that we start generating that passion inside of us, that need to contribute, or that need to do things other than just feed ourselves and shelter ourselves, right?
Yes, exactly. So I think passion is something that many of us need nowadays in order to feel meaning, like that we are living a meaningful life. And often we see passion as something like we need to find some activity to do to like make us happy. I think it also comes from the serving mentality, that when you're actually able to help others, and that's kind of like included in your passion, that's when it's very close already to purpose. And when those two are kind of aligned, then I see that there's lots of great things happening for us.
Yeah, I would agree. Some of our most maybe intimate needs are as human beings is contributing. is
Mhm.
contributing and growing. Yeah, I don't think a lot of people know that, because a
Yeah.
lot of people do stop growing. They just sort of stagnate in wherever they're at, and they don't think about this. But when we
Yeah.
start to give, or we start to use that knowledge that we've gathered to help other people, we start to gain some vitality. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. That was beautifully said.
All right, thanks. Do you have any other final thoughts on that?
On passion, I think sometimes passion is also just something that we think that we like have to find, and when we're searching for it, it's getting harder. It's like chasing happiness just for the sake of happiness, but not realizing like it's something that you just start doing. Like if people are right now missing the passionate thing of their lives, in their lives,
Mm-hmm.
I would still say like start from somewhere and look back. Like what did you do when you were a teenager? Like when mom and dad called you like, okay, come to lunch, come to dinner, time to go now, Saana. And so what was I doing that I didn't want to leave? So I think there are those like clues that have been like have been in our lives already. So if we are missing passion, I would just go and look back, like what did we do when we didn't have the outside world already like so established around us, but we were just human beings interested in something. So what was it that we were interested in? And then kind of like seeing if that thing or that theme kind of like reoccurs in our lives. And then we get to that, okay, what maybe I could start. If it was like reading, like I was a kid who wanted to read at 12 hours a day. So then if it was reading during like when I was 14, maybe now when I would start at 32 years old, maybe I just read 10 pages today or find a new book, something like that. Just start doing stuff to test if this is feeling good for you or really not. So that's just how it like, I think passion isn't something that just comes knocking on your door when you don't even know where to start. Just start somewhere and the exploration is going to be worth it.
Start, explore, and then go, right?
Yep.
Just go do it. All right,
Yeah.
cool. All right, perfect. So that's about the end of our time today. So I'll thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. It was super fun to be here.
All right. And then thanks again to Saana. We'll be right back for our normal segment. If you just stick around, we'll be right back in just a moment. Thank you. And today we're going to be talking about identity. And the way that I've set this whole program up to now is that I've been taking slices out of the complexities of the human person in psychological terms and some neuroscience and things like that. So I've been giving you sort of this layer by layer look at how human behavior is, well, how it starts, how it is projected, how it is utilized. And I've mentioned identity maybe once or twice. Now, the very simplest way that we can identify identity is the way we see ourselves. But it's a little more complex than that. So if we go back to where these terms were formed, Freud had an idea of what identity was, and then Erik Erikson had his view of what identity was. And basically, if you know anything about Freud, you've probably heard about the id, the ego, and the superego. And the id is all those basic animal drives that we all have. The superego is the morality, and then the ego is the balance between the two. And for Freud, that was what our identity was the ego. Now, of course, we've taken ego and put it into a different category sociologically. So when I say that guy has a big ego, most people know what that means. Instead of thinking in terms of Freud, we think in terms of, more something a little bit more derogatory. And then Erikson's form of identity was the response or the result of different conflicts throughout stages of our lives, and how we maneuver ourselves through that forms our identity. like I said, the simplest way of thinking about this is the self concept that we form based on all those pieces that I've talked about: perception, beliefs, values, experiences, memories. So if we take all that information and we use it, we view ourselves through it, that becomes the identity. And it takes time for us to sort of formulate that. Normally we start doing it somewhere in our teen years. In our teen years, when we have that rapid growth of biological components called puberty, we are then starting to start our own identity. We are trying to separate ourselves from our family caregivers and establish ourselves as an individual. So that's why we see a lot of rebelliousness during that stage, is they're simply testing their boundaries and trying to figure out who they are. And if you've ever heard the term, I'm trying to find myself, that's kind of what people are doing. They're trying to establish their identity. And when we think about this, the identity is a lot of different viewpoints. It's our political views, it's our views on morality, it's our views on our views and beliefs on oh heck, what kind of food we like to eat, or anything like that. And then also it's what we do for a living. In fact, in our Western culture, particularly our culture here in the United States, one of our biggest identities that we more or less unconsciously thrive on is, what do you do for a living? Because when we go into small talk, which I've talked about that before, one of the first questions that we normally ask somebody right after their name is, what do you do for a living? And so we identify as that person. I identify as an astronaut, a bus driver, a janitor, a doctor, a lawyer. So it becomes a part of my identity. And then all the pieces of that job are parts of my identity too. A lot of time I used to do public speaking around the psychology of job search. And one of the most devastating pieces of losing a job is a loss of identity that comes with that job. Because you lose the job, you not only lose that part, or the, like, a title or whatever it is, you also lose the place where you worked, you lose the friends and acquaintances that you associated with. So it can really be a big hit to your identity when you lose a job, especially if you've been somewhere for a long time. And we do this throughout our lives. We're always building on our identity as we get older, which was one of Erickson's theories, is that we get older, we start to come to more different, he called them crises, and how we navigate through those crises. So somebody who's my age group, who's in their 50s, they are going to be experiencing an identity growth differently than somebody who's in their 20s, if that makes sense. And then we also have the gender identity thing going on. That's a piece. That's all a piece of this complex idea of who I am from myself, and how I let others define me, or how I rebel against others defining me. So if you take that into account, along with all the other self-defense mechanisms that I've talked about and all the other pieces that we've put together, you start to see this interesting conglomeration of differences coming together to form the uniqueness that is you. See, biologically, we aren't that unique. It's the identity that we create that is wholly us and unique, because there's even similarities between us and people that look like us. There's I can't remember what it was, if it was a study or if it was just an opinion piece, but it's like looking for your doppelganger or something like that. And there's a certain percentage of the population out there in the world that resembles you because of our genetic lineages and all this other stuff. so biologically, we're not very unique. And in fact, if we look at people just from a biological standpoint, there's not a whole lot of differences between us. And that's one of the things that I've been sort of poking at throughout this whole thing, is that we are very, very similar to each other. There was just a new study done about facial expressions and the commonalities between facial expressions and how we can identify what somebody is feeling by the way they express things on their face. And there's this misnomer that there's only 6 basic expressions and then all of them are rest. But what we're talking about is scientifically more or less proving that people understand this across different lines, like socioeconomic, and there I went. I just knocked my train off its tracks. Ethnicities and geographic regions, and that's what I was trying to say. Why is that important? That's kind of the crux of some of the things that I've been talking about is the fact that we are so similar that we don't look at that. To us, similarity is part of the background noise. It's like the snow on your TV. And if you know what I'm referencing, that's part of your identity. If you just figured that reference out, people who are younger than me by about 20 years probably don't know what snow on TV is. Or maybe older, it just depends. But that's our relatability between people who are of this generation versus younger generations, because I can say things and you're going to immediately respond to that because that's part of our identity, our collective identity. So we see this happening in this realm where there's not a whole lot of things that are different. And what I've been showing you throughout this way is that the way that we express emotions and the way that we take in information and the way that we process that information, that all is very similar to the next person in line. So there's 7.5 billion people on the planet, and we are similar in that respect across the board, with small variations in skin color and in eye color, in body shapes, bone density, other factors. So there's a variation, but realistically, we are all the same. What makes us different is how we have taken in all this information and how it comes out through our expressions of individuality or our identity. This is why this is an important piece. It's our identity that makes the difference. And when we talk about that survival instinct, that's what we focus on when we meet other people. We always focus on differences, because difference equals danger. That means we have to pay more attention to it. That's why all the similarities of people go to the background. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many problems with things like racism, because of that piece. We want to focus on those differences, and because of things like negative outgroup stereotyping, we want to make those differences different from us. And because it's us doing the judging, we want those differences to be worse or categorically lower than we are. So how interesting is that? So it's the amalgamation of all of those pieces and how you individually move through your day that creates the differences in you that makes you unique. And that's a great thing, except for when it's not. I hope that's helpful, because I don't know that we always talk about, I don't know that we're always conscious of these things when we get into, especially when we get into debates about politics or get into debates about Well, whatever topic we're going to debate about and get upset about and start yelling and screaming and losing our minds over. Masks, vaccines, the president, the election, whatever it is, because the fact of the matter is those are simply belief systems based in identity. And not that I'm trying to say that identity is wrong. I'm just saying that this is how we express those. And I mentioned the paradox of the human is that we need other people around us, but we also need to be an individual. So there's this constant push and pull about who am I and who am I in this group? Because in order to be in part of that group, I always have to suppress pieces of myself. And then when we get into these ideas like authenticity, which is a very big well, it's becoming a buzzword. It's a very big thing in our social schema today, is being authentic. Why we're getting pushback from some of that stuff, because being authentic means that you have to be able to understand and identify with your identity and be able to express yourself through that. Because anytime we suppress parts of our identity, we get conflict, we get cognitive dissonance. So see how it gets really complex really quick. And if you're like me, it's super awesome to try and puzzle out these things and why this and why that and look at that and look at this. But that's identity. And you have your identity and I have my identity. We all have our identities. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So stick around. We'll be right back with the question of the day, which is not going to have anything to do with identity, except when it does. All right, we're back with the question of the day. Today's question is, why do people treat their pets like humans? And unfortunately, this one is anonymous with a really strange email address, so I won't be saying the email address, but it's anonymous. Why do people treat their pets like humans? And that's a good question. When we treat our animals like human, now, I don't know how you go about your daily life, but if you're like me, you talk to your pets. And then there's a sliding scale about how we interact with our pets on this scale that goes up to leaving them mansions and putting them in daycares and expensive hotels with chef prepared meals, which actually is a thing. Why do we do that? It's called anthropomorphizing. And that is basically a projection of our human being, our humanness onto other creatures or objects. We do it with a lot of things. We anthropomorphize a lot of things. If you thinking of boats and ships, traditionally they are called her, and they are named. That's an anthropomorphization. I think that's probably that. Anthropomorphization. I don't know if that's the correct term, but we're going to use that. But when we do it with our pets, we're doing it in a more dynamic way, instead of doing it with our computer or our car or whatever it is. Why do we do it? Well, part of the reason why we do it is for social bonding. And it may simply be a comfort system where if I'm going to talk to my pet, then my pet needs to be more human. So I'm going to unconsciously create that human character in my pet. That way me interacting with it in a way that is human in nature doesn't trip any alarms, because technically speaking, we could say that that's delusional behavior. If I talk to my pets, that's delusional behavior, because we're not we're fantasizing, right? We're setting up a little bit of a fantasy. So I think we can say that by anthropomorphizing our pets and projecting some human traits on them, that we can more easily get around that idea. And again, I'm not trying to say that there's anything wrong with this stuff, right? We can argue all day about what delusion is and isn't, and it's not going to make any difference unless it really affects your life in a very negative way, which is how it becomes a psychological issue. So we do this. We treat our pets like humans because it helps us feel more socially bonded, especially if we are in need of comfort or some sort of social interaction. Now, animals have their own personalities and they have emotions, so they do have their own personalities, and that's a way that we can further make that commonality between us, because that personality. And over time, there's this saying that pets start resembling their owners, or vice versa, because because of the way we treat them conditions them to act a certain way. So they start acting a certain way, and we again place more human characteristics on that. We can also say that a big contributor to this is the media. The media affects us in so many ways, and part of the ways that the media affects this is just walk into a Petco or a pet shop, or better yet, go to a doggy daycare, or even better yet, go to one of these 5-star hotels for animals, which exist. And you will see that through media and capitalism, we are creating a social situation, that this is okay, that this is a normal, natural thing for you to do, and spending thousands of dollars on your pet spa day is a natural and normal thing to do. What are the problems with this? Well, the problems with this is that animals are not human, and it can create problem behaviors in the animal depending on what it is. So if you have some questions about that, ask a local dog trainer about what happens when a dog is treated like a human. A dog is a pack animal. A dog is not relationally built for a person if the person doesn't treat them like they're in a pack. And so, we leave the dog, we go to work, and then we come home and find the dog has chewed up all of our shoes, and we get irate and start beating the dog, and the dog has no idea what it's doing because it's been super anxious all day, because it's been alone and doesn't have its pack mates around. You see what I mean? See what I'm getting at? It's the same way that we treat animals like tigers and exotic animals when we treat them like pets. We are forgetting that they are animals that are genetically programmed to do certain things, like hunt and kill. Okay, now take that for what it is, but that's the downside of anthropomorphizing our pets. We're not supposed to be treating them like humans. We're supposed to be treating them as what they are. And that is, for a dog, it would be treating them as a dog, as a pack animal. Cats are a whole different story anyway, because they're just waiting around for you to kick it so they can have lunch. At any rate, I hope I didn't get in trouble there. At any rate, Anonymous, that is why we do that. We do it for our own social needs and our own social bonding and to some extent our own image and identity. There it is. So thanks for asking that question. If you do have any questions for me about the topics, about our guests, or about anything, just let me know at mike@whatdrivesyou.net. Thanks for showing up this week. I hope it was enjoyable. I hope it was informative, and I hope to see you next week. So have a great day. Thanks and goodbye.